Okay, so in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at a 13 megapixel 4K camera for the Raspberry Pi 4. I know, right? 4K. So with that said, let's dive straight into the video. Alright, so what is this 4K camera? Well, this one is called the Ecamm 130 Curb, and it's from a company called Econ Systems, which mainly focuses on camera hardware. And this camera is built specifically for the Raspberry Pi 4, as you'll see in a little bit. But let's start out with what's included in the box though. So you basically receive this camera module right here, and it has a cap on top to protect the camera lens, and it also comes with a 15 centimeter FPS cable to connect the camera to the Raspberry Pi 4 itself. Okay, so this camera can take photos up to 4K, as you will see in a little bit, but let's talk about these specs a little bit. So the camera has auto white balance, auto exposure control, in addition to a complete image signal processing pipeline. So yes, this camera has some pretty cool features built into it, and this camera does shoot in 4K, even like 4K video, but sadly when you turn it up to 4K, it's only at 15 frames per second or 15 FPS. So there is definitely a noticeable lag, as you can see in the recording right here. Like as I kind of move around, it just doesn't feel so smooth, and that's to it only running at 15 FPS versus something like 30 or 60 FPS. And here's a screenshot of the resolutions to the FPS and give. So basically like 1080p gives 60 FPS and 4K can give 15. So there's like different resolutions give different types of FPS. So you can really see that 1080p is definitely the sweet spot because it comes with 60 FPS out of the box. But before we jump into some picture quality, let's talk about drivers and support for the system itself. So first of all, the people over at Econ Systems actually provide a pre-built Raspbian image or a pre-built Raspberry Pi OS image with the proper camera drivers pre-installed. Sadly, the image seems to be a little bit outdated, at least to me, as you can see right here, with some strange functionalities. But does the image work? It does work, and the camera drivers are pre-included, which is also really nice. And on their little guide PDF, there's also something called a Yocto image or a Yocto image, which I don't really know what it is, but it must be some type of alternative to Raspberry Pi OS. I did not spend the time trying it out since Raspberry Pi OS did work, and I didn't want to spend the time. But there is that if you know what it is and if you did want to try it. So once you boot into the Raspberry Pi OS image that they provide, you really won't notice anything specific to this camera like right out of the box. It's going to look kind of like Raspberry Pi OS, but they have kind of changed some of the functionalities, but you will be at home since this does look pretty much just like Raspberry Pi OS. Until you open up the terminal, you open up the terminal and you type in GST / capture, and this basically opens up the camera settings or the camera application in which you can take photos, configure resolutions, and have like a live feed of the camera. So this camera right here is going to be recognized as camera 0, which is usually number 7 on the list, at least for me. So you type in the number 7 right here and it pops straight up with a live camera feed, which I assume is 1080p because it seems really smooth, as you're going to see right here. Like I'm moving around the whole camera feed, really awesome. So as far as I can tell though, it's not a recording actually, it's just like a live camera feed. So even though it looks like a recording, it's just kind of a live feed of what the camera is doing. So if I try to exit this live camera feed, here you're going to see that we have a couple of options to do with this camera. So we have still capture mode, streaming mode, features mode, and an exit from the application button. So still capture mode is basically taking a photo and it saves it to a file in your system. So let's give that a go. So here you can actually, so first of all, I'm going to choose still capture mode, and here I can configure the resolution of the photo I want to take. So for this photo, I want to go high and I want to try a 4K image, so I have to type in the width first and then the length. And you can actually configure the image pixel format as well to save it either as a .bmp file or a .yuv file, and then you after that you configure that and you can capture the photo. So So here are some example photos that I actually took for this process, and you can really judge what they look like. You can tell me what they look like down below, but yeah. So after that, if I went ahead and I entered the streaming mode, you can see I can configure the resolution to 4K as well, and here you can see the lag definitely because it's only playing at 15 frames per second. But if I tried to exit this and I entered 1080p mode, you can see how it becomes so much smoother, and it's just a much more enjoyable experience. Once you exit all of these settings, there are some additional settings that you can actually play around with. If you are a real camera geek, which I'm not, you can configure the exposure, the brightness, the contrast. Like right here, you're seeing there are a lot of settings here that you could play around with if you really do know, but I personally don't, so it's really hard to judge. Okay, so you have an idea of what this camera can do and what some possible photos look like. So the question, should you be buying this camera? Well, first of all, the price of this camera is $99 US, so it's not a cheap camera by no means, so keep that in mind. However, if you're looking for a 4K Raspberry Pi camera, and you think the performance of this camera is good, and you think that you can figure out using this camera's drivers, then yeah, I could recommend this camera. However, I would say if you're newer to the Raspberry Pi game and you just don't know too much, something like the official Raspberry Pi camera might be much easier to get started with because many more people have actually used it. There's so many projects with it, so many guides and so many videos. So if you're newer to the game, something that's more well supported by the community is obviously going to be better. But I would say this camera is, if you want a 4K camera, this might be one to check out. So again, these are just some of my own thoughts that have popped into my head, and if you think otherwise, let me know down below in the comments. So yeah. Alright then, if you enjoyed the video, if you really did, a sub would be spectacular. So, thanks for watching.